Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. There are many different types of blackmail. If you cheat on your spouse and someone finds out about it, they may threaten to tell your spouse about it if you don't pay them or do something valuable for them. Or someone may find out that you have committed a crime, major or minor, and demand money for not reporting it to the authorities. In a broader sense, blackmail is a threat to do or say something if the victim does not agree to do something for the person who threatens. I knew about the classic types of blackmail, but not about emotional blackmail. I have learned that emotional blackmail is a dysfunctional form of manipulation in which the blackmailer uses the victim's feelings to control her behavior for his own personal interests. How did I, Blake Burns, find out about this? I became a victim. I respected my older brother Kevin more than anyone in the world. My father died when Kevin was 12, and my sister and I were 9 and 6 years old, respectively. My mother was out of her mind for a long time. Kevin took on an adult role and, in fact, raised my sister and me alone for a year, while my mother tried to come to her senses. Even after she returned to relative normalcy, she still relied heavily on Kevin. Because Kevin sacrificed himself for his family, he never had a normal teenage life. The responsibility he took on was too great. Looking back, my sister, my mother, and I took advantage of Kevin's thoughtfulness to his detriment. He was unable to fulfill some of his dreams because we were very dependent on his physical, emotional, and, ultimately, even financial stability. This is one of many examples of Kevin sacrificing himself for his family because of his keen interest in mathematics and technology. He always dreamed of going to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Because of our dependence on him, even though he was smart enough to go to MIT, he instead enrolled in a local community college and studied all the decent math or technology courses they had, and then enrolled in a local university that was ranked 185th, the best national university in the USA, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, ranked second in the same survey. As another example, Kevin was a baseball league star in our city at the age of 12. Besides being good at baseball, Kevin loved it. After our father's death, he never played baseball pro bono again because of his responsibilities to his family. From an economic point of view, things were not going well for us either. My mother hired contingency lawyers to handle a lawsuit related to my father's death, but it was a long process that stretched over the years long enough to ruin Kevin's teenage years. While studying at the college I most wanted to go to, which was made possible by Kevin's hard work after graduation and the loans I received due to my family's economic situation, between my 18th and 19th birthdays, I finally began to realize how much Kevin he did it for our family, and I felt embarrassed that I relied on him so much when I was growing up, and that I could never sacrifice my life for him the way he sacrificed for us. Then, when I was 20 years old, something good happened to Kevin. At first I thought it was karma, because karma is the natural law of cause and effect, according to which, no matter what energy you put into something, you will get back, good or bad. In other words, if you do good, then that good will pay off someday, even if in another form. I considered it karma that Kevin fell in love. He was really happy and finally went about his business. As my sister, Mom and I were now in a good position. We all rejoiced at his happiness. Although I was a little skeptical about Julie Wiggins, the woman he fell in love with, because she seemed too pretentious and frivolous to me, there was no way I would spoil Kevin's mood by drawing attention to my skepticism. I was just glad that he had finally found bliss. Julie Wiggins was Kevin's age 6 years older than me, and, although they didn't meet at the university he graduated from, she got an art degree from the same school. I wouldn't call Julie beautiful. Few people would say that, but most men would find her seductive, and some would find her damn sultry. She exuded an aura that was both mysterious and alluring. That's probably the limit of my vocabulary to describe her. Kevin has repeatedly told me that, in his opinion, she is not from his circle in terms of appearance, although I have always objected that this is not the case. I was best man at Kevin and Julie's wedding. Shortly before that, another good thing happened in my family. The 13-year-long and painful trial related to my father's death was finally over, and the payment to my mother was very substantial. She could easily afford to pay for the wedding. Julie's parents were not rich, and repay the loans that my sister and I took out during college. The wedding went great, especially since one of the unmarried bridesmaids named Nicole, Julie's good friend, and I found a common language. Despite the fact that Nicole was 6 years older than me, we had the kind of good one-night stand that any guy has the right to dream about, let alone have. I was a little surprised that your conscientious, straight, as an arrow brother married a wild and flighty woman like Julie. No matter how much I love her, she can eventually drive him crazy. During each of our conversations with Julie and Kevin, it seemed to me that she completely controlled his heart and mind, and I thought that he treated her too respectfully. I also didn't think I was being overly paranoid when I thought she was flirting with me more than was appropriate. I never said anything to Kevin about my suspicions. He was finally happy and free after living as a slave to his family, and there was no way I could ruin his happiness. After working as an engineer for a year, I decided to enroll in graduate school. The school I wanted to attend was in the same city where Kevin and Julie lived. Although I had no debts and had some savings, I was not awash in money, and graduate school was expensive, even with my partial scholarship. When Kevin found out without warning what I was planning, he invited me to live with him and Julie for about 18 months, which will take me to graduate. I reluctantly accepted Kevin's offer until he called Julie, and she clearly sincerely tried to convince me to agree. I was surprised by this. Although I never had any conflicts with Julie, since I was a little reserved with her, I didn't think she would want me to live with them. They did have a 4-bedroom house, so they probably had enough space, and their house was only 6 kilometers from campus, so I agreed on the condition that they would let me do housework and pay for food and utilities. For the first 5 months or so, our lives were surprisingly successful. I mowed the lawn, did other yard work, and cooked dinner at least twice a week, and often 4. I tried not to interfere with Kevin and Julie spending time together, and especially tried to make sure that I was not at home on Friday and Saturday evenings. Then something happened that changed everything. Julie taught art at the same university where I received my master's degree, although the art school was on a different campus, about 2 kilometers in the opposite direction from Kevin and Julie's house than the one I studied at. It was Wednesday morning, the day Julie and I didn't have classes until noon, and Kevin was at work. We were having a simple breakfast, during which I was preparing everything necessary, when Julie started telling me about the portrait painting courses she taught. After some initial discussion of what portrait painting was, which didn't seem too interesting to me, she said, "I have several sessions planned for which I will need nude male and female models. I have a female model, but I need a man. Are you interested?" I almost choked on a piece of toasted bagel. She finally caught my attention. "Are you serious?" I asked, after making sure I didn't need the Heimlich maneuver. "Of course," she smiled. "I know that your current part-time job only pays $19 an hour, and you always need money. In the classes I teach, we pay $25 an hour in cash, and that's a lot less work. Will you be there?" I swallowed. "Of course, I am the lead teacher of the basic course and the assistant of the advanced one. I'm not comfortable undressing in front of you," I muttered. "God, don't be a prude," she laughed. "The human body is an art. At least some human bodies," she continued. She then stood up and took off the t-shirt and shorts she was wearing, which turned out to be her only clothes before pirouetting. I was amazed. Although I've always thought that Julie has a beautiful body, I've never seen her in a bikini or other revealing clothes. I was amazed at how beautiful her figure was. "See, it's nothing special," she smiled, putting on her shorts again. Will Kevin find out about this?" That was all I could think of in response. "We can tell him if you want. I certainly won't hide it from him." I couldn't believe I was actually considering her request, but I think the chemicals raging in my brain after I saw her naked body made me dizzy. "How long does the session last?" 3 hours with a break for you for 5 to 10 minutes every hour. 2 sessions will be required for each session. "What is the composition of the class?" There are 2 different classes. The main class that you will pose for first is 24 students, 20 female freshmen and 4 male freshmen. The second class, Advanced, consists of 14 students, 12 younger or older women and 2 younger or older men. "When should I give you an answer?" "In a week, starting on Friday. It's going to be fun." "You have to agree," she smiled, and then said, "I need to take a shower and go to school." Using deep breathing exercises and then going to the school gym to work out, I finally got my emotions under control. It was hard to concentrate on my classes that day, especially considering that the only attractive woman in all my master's engineering courses was unusually poorly dressed and sat in front, and to my right on theoretical hydrodynamics, but I managed to hold out all day. After that day, Julie started flirting with me more, even in front of Kevin. He didn't seem to have a problem with that. I was still wondering why the hell I was even thinking about accepting Julie's offer when she showed me some portrait drawings taken in classes in previous years and explained how important it is for aspiring artists to understand the real human anatomy. These drawings calmed me down a bit because they were really artistic. When I was temporarily working part-time just for a month while the owner of the engineering graphics company I worked for went on vacation, I decided to accept Julie's offer, if Kevin didn't mind. 2 days before Julie needed my answer, Kevin and I were drinking beer together at a sports bar and watching his favorite baseball team play on big screens when I brought up the subject. Listen, brother, I do not know if Julie told you, but she needs a naked male model for her 2 classes, and she asked if I had any interest. Would you have a problem if I agreed? Kevin looked a little puzzled and then said, No, I thought you'd already done that. I know Julie is in trouble because she said she needed a tall, athletic male model who would contrast with a short, plump female model, and that it would really help her. I don't have a problem with that. I support Julie as much as I can, and you're obviously right for her. I was going to say more, but considering how indifferent he was about it, I decided not to wake the sleeping dog. Okay, I just wanted to consult with you before agreeing. Then one of the runners tried to beat the home team, which delighted the whole crowd in the sports bar, and for the rest of the evening we just talked about sports. The next day, I told Julie that I wouldn't mind modeling in her classes as long as it didn't interfere with my classes. She promised that it wouldn't happen, and then shocked the hell out of me by pulling my neck to her face and giving me a quick kiss on the lips. I was completely confused when my little soldier tried to salute, but fortunately she didn't notice anything, and I managed to calm him down. I was very nervous. Dressed only in a bathrobe, waiting for the portrait painting to begin at 8 a.m. on Wednesday. The classroom had 2 levels of hemispherical zones in front of the pseudo-stand, with easels positioned along each level. There are 24 easels in total. There was an impatient expression on the faces of all the students. Julie gave a little presentation before we started. She emphasized that this is not a love event, but an artistic one, and gave some advice on how to proceed. At the end of her speech, she read a quote from Andres Loomis. I had no idea who it was, but later Julie explained to me that he was a famous illustrator, commercial artist and writer of the first half of the 20th century and the developer of the Loomis method, whatever that means. The naked human figure should serve as the basis for any study of the figure. It is impossible to draw a figure in clothes or drapery without knowing the structure and shape of the figure underneath. An artist who cannot put a figure together correctly has not a single chance in 1,000 of success, neither as a draftsman nor as a painter. Good. It makes sense, I thought to myself. Then she actually introduced me by name. This is my brother-in-law, Blake Burns. If you don't mind, Blake, please take the position I asked you to take. Since this is not a treatise on artistic modeling of the nude, I will refrain from talking about it further. I will only say that I was pleased that $75 for a 3-hour session was paid in cash from the Art Faculty Charity Fund, and I received a lot of smiles from the students in both classes when Julie and I went to class. I, dressed, checked their work at the end of the second lesson of each class. One thing bothered me. After the second lesson of the advanced course, after getting dressed, I was looking for Julia and suddenly came across her when she was talking to Simone, a female professor whose assistant she was, and heard a conversation that I would like to forget about. I didn't think 40-plus-year-old art teachers giggled. Yes, isn't it? Julie chuckled. The most beautiful one I've ever seen. That's why I asked him to pose. The students at my introductory class were delighted with this. I laughed to myself when I chastised them for thinking lovingly and not artistically, even though I thought lovingly myself. This elicited another chuckle from Simone. Did she see me in the shower? Or did she sneak into my room and lift the covers while I was sleeping? Or what the hell else? I decided that I need to think about it a little more and avoid exposure in the future. To interrupt this gossip, I took a few steps back and then shouted, Julie, where are you? Julie. Julie came out of the room where she and Simone were talking with a flushed face and said, Listen, Blake, do you want to get your last payment? You could pay me at home. I just wanted to say goodbye to you and Simone and say that it wasn't as hard as I feared. Do you know where Simone is? Simone left the room where she and Julie were talking. Her face also turned slightly red. "Thank you so much for modeling, Blake. You really helped us out of this mess," Simone smiled. We chatted for a few more minutes. Simone paid me, and I left, telling Julie that I would cook dinner that evening. Although I think I could have become a professional actor, for the next few days I played so normally that my head was in chaos most of the time. About 2 weeks after my last performance as a nude model, Kevin had to go on a rare business trip. Although Julie had stepped up her flirting after art lessons, it didn't seem like it was going to extremes, so I foolishly didn't have any concerns when I drove Kevin to the airport on Tuesday morning and then went to class. When I returned home from class, Julie cooked a pleasant, albeit plebeian, dinner, and we chatted about a variety of things. After dinner, I want to show you the final drawings of your portraits that my main class made and evaluate them. "There's something else I want to talk to you about," Julie said with a big smile. "It sounds great," was my reply. "I'll clean up, and then you can show me. Do you want to put this on the kitchen table?" "That would be great," she smiled again. I quickly cleaned and wiped the kitchen table, put all the dishes and silverware in the dishwasher, and washed the pans on which Julia cooked dinner. By the time I finished, all of her portfolio from the portrait drawing lesson was already on the table. In fact, it was fun and interesting for me to watch what all the students were doing. Julia told me what grade she intended to give each drawing and why, and allowed me to raise or lower it by half a point if I wanted. I asked her to rate only 3 drawings half a point higher and 2 half a point lower, and she agreed. Julie drank a significant amount of wine when she viewed the drawings with me, while I drank only 1 bottle of beer. As I said, it was an interesting and thought-provoking experience. The next item on her agenda was not a fun one. After I helped her put her portfolio and her gradebook in the car, she asked me to sit with her in the living room. Although she was not drunk at all, the wine weakened her restraint even more than was usual for her uninhibited nature. "Listen, Blake. I need you to listen to me to the end before you say anything." "Okay." "What is it?" she asked with a devilish grin. "Okay," I shrugged. "As you know, your brother Kevin is a really great guy, and you probably think he's the best person you know." I didn't say anything, but I nodded my head vigorously in agreement. "I love him madly, but I have a real problem." I was sweating, and my palms became sticky, and I was about to say something, but she raised her hand, stopping me, and said, "You promised to listen to me to the end," so I didn't say anything. After making sure I wasn't going to put anything in, she continued. "As I said, I have a plan to make sure that Kevin doesn't get hurt, and I satisfy my love appetite. My plan is for you and me to have a loving relationship. Since I like to poke my nose into your business, I know that you haven't made love very often, so that could help you a lot too," she chuckled. I almost shit my pants when I heard what she said. I would have asked her to repeat it, but I could clearly hear every amazing word. The only thing I could think of, since my sweat glands were working overtime, was, "I hope you're kidding." "Definitely not," she replied sharply, getting up and quickly taking off her sundress, the only thing she was wearing besides her shoes. "You can't tell me that you don't like my body. I know that sometimes you look at me with lust," she giggled. "I'm not mocking you. I'm not denying that you have a great figure, but I could never stab Kevin in the back, and I'm shocked that you can," I growled back. After I forced her to put the dress back on, we had a further conversation. She was stressed out and trying to be logical, although I didn't see any logic in this situation and was furious. When, after about another 10 minutes of discussion, I decisively told her, "No way in the world." She giggled, "Then I'll do it somewhere else, and when Kevin finds out, he'll be desperate and you'll be to blame," and ran out of the room. I was so fed up with the whole discussion that I couldn't focus on my homework, so I went to the campus fitness center, pumped an iron, and beat a 50-pound pair to let off steam. Fortunately, Kevin was only gone for 2 nights, because although my relationship with Julie wasn't cold, it still wasn't warm and fluffy until Kevin returned. When Kevin returned, everything seemed to quickly return to normal, and in the following days, Julie and I even met one-on-one several times, and this topic was no longer raised. We had normal conversations. What was unusual was my dreams at that time. I couldn't get some disturbing features of my very realistic dreams out of my head. I decided that all I really needed was to make love, which I've achieved extremely rarely since I moved in with Kevin and Julie, and even thought about calling one of the older women who secretly gave me their phone numbers when they shook my hand at the end. drawing a portrait. Still making up my mind, on Thursday around noon, when I was at home and working with a part-time CAD program, I went into the kitchen to get something to drink and saw Julia walking past dressed up. "You look good. What's the occasion?" I asked innocently. Without malice, but with a mischievous intonation, she replied, "Well, since you don't want to help me with my libido problem, I found someone who will help. I'll be back and I'll be happy by the time Kevin gets home. You're going to cook dinner, aren't you?" She grinned and walked out the door. I was stunned, but I hoped she was just mocking me. Her comment made it difficult for me to get back to work, but eventually I was able to focus on the CAD program and put it out of my mind. I didn't like Julie's appearance when she got home just a few minutes before Kevin, especially the smirk on her face, but none of us said anything. Nothing much happened until that Saturday, when Kevin, looking very upset, invited me to go to a baseball game with him, but instead went to the local forest reserve first. He wanted to talk. He had never done anything like this before. "Blake, were you at home Thursday afternoon?" "You mean last Thursday, Kevin?" "Yes, last Thursday." "Yes, around lunchtime. I worked in the CAD program part-time until about 2:30 or 3 o'clock, and then I mowed the lawn, and around 5:30 I started cooking dinner." "Why are you asking?" I answered honestly. "Because my friend said he thought he saw Julie with another guy parked in the motel parking lot around 3 p.m. I would just die if she cheated on me." "I couldn't stand it," he replied, on the verge of tears. Now I had a choice. I could ruin Kevin's life by telling him that his wife was probably cheating on him, or I could lie and save him and then find a way to get Julie to back off. I chose the latter. "I don't think that's possible, Kevin. Although I didn't see her every minute while I was at home, I'm pretty damn sure she was home at 3:15 because I looked at my watch when she offered me lemonade while I was mowing, and I know for sure that she didn't just come home because her car was in the garage, the driveway at the time when I went out to cut the grass. Unless she had a twin sister who gave me lemonade, it couldn't have been her," I lied. I've never seen anyone so relieved in my life, and I've rarely seen anyone so emotional. Although Kevin had never cried in all the time he had been a pillar of support for our family, after our father's death he began to sob with relief. I hugged him and told him that everything was fine. When he finally got his emotions under control, he said, "I think you think I'm weak." "No, damn it," I growled with a little more anger than I intended. "You're the strongest person I know. You saved our family after your father died, for which none of us will ever be able to repay you. I know how much you love Julie, and that's no reason to be embarrassed." We talked for a few more minutes, and every word he said about Julie was like an ice pick stabbing into my stomach. Then we actually went to a minor league game, and by the time we got home, he had a smile on his face, as wide as it was on the street. It was hard to focus on the game, given the chaos in my brain, but I didn't give up. I needed to talk to Julie next week, but I didn't know what I could do except kill her, which also wouldn't help Kevin. It was only 3 days after I lied to Kevin that I was able to talk to Julie. After Kevin left for work, and before Julie and I went to class, I cornered her. "Julie, you can't cheat on Kevin. Someone who works with Kevin at the motel saw you on Thursday. He was heartbroken until I lied to cover your ass and told him you were here with me. I expected it to have an effect on Julie, but it didn't happen. That only confirms my point, Blake. If you give me what I need, no one will see me anymore, and Kevin will be happy as a clam. If you don't, then even if I'm careful, he'll eventually find out, because I'll have to leave the house. I'll never have anyone else." "Here," she smiled. "I could threaten to beat or kill anyone you had a relationship with," I growled, trying to sound cool. "Oh, Blake, honey," she smiled, stroking my chest. "First of all, you don't have time to follow me everywhere. Secondly, I'm not going to have a relationship with anyone other than you and Kevin. I'll just make love to them. Thirdly, you are big and strong, but without violence. Fourth, even if you beat someone up or scare them away, it won't affect my style at all. Honey, guys flock to me like bees to honey." "Then maybe I'll beat you up," I growled again, trying to make it sound even tougher. She laughed. "Blake, darling, you would never hurt a woman. It's not in your nature. One of the reasons why it would be so good for us to be together, besides the fact that we would really enjoy using each other to the point of insanity, is that you are the most polite, kind personable man towards women that I have ever seen in my life. Admit it, honey, if you want to save your brother's happiness, you'll have to grit your teeth and use your daughter-in-law regularly. Then she kissed the fingers on her right hand, brought them to my lips, and brushed past me to the door. Damn, 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 I moaned. I thought I was at least a little reasonable, but I couldn't find any acceptable way out of this situation. I needed to do something to develop a positive attitude. The only active step I was sure I could take was to install a tracker on her car, which I did that same night. 2 days later, on Thursday, Kevin had another infrequent business trip, or maybe he would have to travel more in the future, which would make it difficult for me to manage Julie. Julia said that she had a faculty meeting that night, which she dressed better than I expected, so when she left, I followed her using the tracker. I really think I would have put on a ski mask and beaten the crap out of any guy she was with if she had cheated that night. I even had a ski mask that Julie had never seen before, black clothes, and a baton in my car. Fortunately, she actually went to the faculty meeting. I quietly watched what was happening for about half an hour, found out when it was supposed to end, and returned home. I looked at the tracker that I had installed on my monitor at home while I was doing engineering calculations for a course in theoretical hydrodynamics, and I was very glad that she returned home immediately after the meeting. When she returned, we chatted for a while, and then both went to bed. During this love, I have never felt physically better than at any other time in my life. About 10 minutes after that love, I've never felt emotionally worse. In the end, Julie pulled away from me, snuggled up to me, and, with a wide smile illuminated by the moonbeams coming through the skylight of my room, said, "It was amazing. Give us both the satisfaction of love and ensure the happiness of your brother. Let's make this a regular event." Guilt plagued me for 10 minutes, and then I was so tired that I passed out rather than fell asleep, until my alarm clock rang at 6:33 the next morning. Since I'm a weak person, I couldn't figure out how to get rid of Julie's emotional blackmail towards me, and since I couldn't deny that using her was awesome, I gave in. The only sign of my firmness was that I made it clear to her that if she ever cheated with anyone else, I would cripple him. To this she replied, "If you're going to be my big boy, I won't need anyone else. Why eat a hamburger on the street if you have an excellent steak at home?" Before she pulled my head to her and kissed me. Considering that I was a traitor to the person I respected most in the world, and considering that I considered myself a weakling, and considering that I had to resort to mental tricks to avoid feeling guilty, everything went well in the following months. On average, Julie and I made love 5 times a week, and Julie swore that our affairs had not affected Kevin's love life in the slightest. I'm sure she was right, because Kevin was the happiest person I've ever seen, and Julie treated him like a king in the house and when they went outside. Besides, I hate to admit it, but Julie was the best in love in my entire extensive practice. She was passionate, sometimes gentle, sometimes aggressive, inventive, and nothing went unnoticed. Also, although she was a little demanding sometimes, she was never bitchy or rude. Julie and I were very careful both during and without copulation. We always slept in my bed with the door closed. There were sensors on all the doors in the house that rang on our iPhones if the doors opened, and we never took a shower in the main bathroom, but only in my bathroom. I also washed the bed linen regularly. We never tried to make love at night unless Kevin was away. During regular classes, we never had any tenderness, nothing but hugs. We absolutely never showed affection for each other in public, even if we thought no one was watching. When we went out together, sometimes I invited her on a symbolic date. We were especially careful, and Julie even stopped drinking so as not to accidentally say or do something that could cause trouble. One evening was particularly interesting. I didn't have a date, but I went with Kevin and Julie to dinner, and then, impromptu, to a dance club. With Julie, I danced only fast dances and again nothing but hugs. After we stayed there for a while, Simone, the professor of fine arts, whose assistant Julie was when I posed for the course Portrait Painting, came with her friends. Julie came over to greet her, and after Simone had settled in with her friends, she came over to our table. I didn't pay much attention to this when Simone was wearing an artistic robe that she wore to portrait classes, but dressed for a dance club, I couldn't help but notice that she had big breasts. She was fun to chat with, and I ended up dancing 5 or 6 dances with her. Kevin also danced with her a couple of times while I danced with Julie. During the conversation, I asked where her husband was, I did not see rings on her fingers either that evening or during portrait classes, but assumed that she was married. She answered quickly, "I'm divorced," and then quickly changed the subject. About a month after visiting the dance club, Julie and Kevin went on a 10-day vacation. Kevin looked extremely happy when I escorted them to the airport. I haven't courted other women since I started making love to Julie because it wasn't necessary. I was completely lovingly satisfied. However, in her absence, I regretted that I did not have a relationship so that I could be sure that we would sleep together. When I was shopping at the local Kroger on Wednesday morning after Kevin and Julie left, and feeling sorry for myself, I bumped into Simone. She was exceptionally friendly. She saw what was in my cart. "Is Julie making lasagna tonight?" "What is it?" she asked. "No, she and Kevin won't be in town until next Monday. I've already cooked lasagna once, without much success, but I'll try again tonight," I smiled. "Maybe we can help each other," she smiled back. "My kitchen is being renovated, and I hate eating alone, so I cook amazing lasagna. Let me come to your house and cook lasagna for us, and you make a salad and treat me to a glass of red wine." "Sounds like a plan," I smiled. She already knew where Julie lived and promised to come around 6 in the evening. I didn't really expect Simone to come to me except for dinner, but given her comment after my last portrait modeling class about my kit and the big hug she gave me at the dance club, there was a chance I'd be lucky. I would take your word for it. Despite the fact that Simone was, as Julie told me at one point, 42 years old, her curvy body would have aroused almost any man. I was polite as usual when we cooked dinner together. I poured her several glasses of wine, and we had a nice, friendly chat. When I pulled out a chair for her so she could sit down when dinner was ready, she smiled at me and said, "You don't have to be so polite, Blake. I am a simple man." After dinner, we went for a walk to the local park and back, and when we returned to the house, as soon as we entered the front door, she turned to face me and, looking through me, said, "I'm really excited, Blake. I'm not too old for you, am I? You have the body of a goddess." I smiled back, and then took her in my arms and kissed her passionately. Despite the fact that Simone was 17 years older than me, she was almost as much fun in bed with her as with Julie. However, her body was completely different. Simone spent the night with me on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and we had a great time. I expected her to stay on both Saturday and Sunday, but on Saturday morning at breakfast she hit me between the eyes. "God, I wish my husband hadn't come back this afternoon. I'd love to make love to you all weekend," she said. "What?" I almost screamed. "Are you married?" "Yes, but it's not a problem, dear. What he doesn't know won't hurt him," she giggled. "You never wear rings, and when I asked you at the dance club where your husband was, you answered, 'I'm divorced.' Why did you lie to me?" "I didn't lie. I divorced my first husband. John is my second husband. You should have asked more questions, but judging by your reaction, I conclude that we wouldn't have had 3 unforgettable nights together if I had told you that I got married again after the divorce, so I'm glad I was a little vague," she giggled again. I groaned to myself, "Damn, what a disgusting person you are. You're using your married daughter-in-law, and now another married woman." At that moment, I wanted to be rude to Simone, but rudeness towards women is not a trait of my character. Besides, loving her really saved me from longing for Julie. So after a moment of inner turmoil, I just shrugged and chatted with her as usual. Simone wanted to roll in the hay one more time before leaving, but I politely refused. However, I kissed her very passionately and squeezed her breasts. When I picked Kevin and Julie up from the airport on Monday evening, they looked great rested, tanned, and happy. I foolishly thought that maybe after the vacation Julie would change her attitude to extracurricular love, and I certainly wasn't going to initiate anything. I realized how stupid it was when, on Tuesday morning, less than 5 minutes after Kevin left for work, Julie attacked me. Usually, when we make love on a weekday, I bring it to a certain point, and then we make love. Then we hug a little and take a shower together, and then we continue our day. It usually takes about 50 to 60 minutes. She wasn't interested in any foreplay that morning, and she attacked me with the eagerness of a starved panther devouring prey. When we were doing this for 2.5 hours and she still wanted more, but I had to stop it. "Julie, I have to go to class, and so do you. Don't you?" "I'll say I'm sick," she said, "because I'm sick." In the end, I talked her out of making love all day. We took a shower together where I barely resisted using it again, and eventually we got to where we needed to be just in time. The next event in the Kevin, Julie, and Blake saga took place on Sunday evening, about 6 weeks after Julie and Kevin returned from vacation. That weekend, Julie and Kevin smiled and kissed more often than usual. At dinner on Sunday evening, I finally asked, "What's the matter with you two? Are you both being stupid?" Kevin looked at Julie. She smiled at him and nodded her head. Then he looked at me and said, "We're pregnant." I didn't even know that Julie had given up birth control. Of course, my initial scared reaction was 50-50 that the baby is mine. But fortunately, Kevin interpreted my reaction as complete surprise, not fear. I was able to regain my composure within a few seconds. "I've become a great actor since I started making love to Julie," smiled broadly and said, "Congratulations." I got up from my chair and hugged each of them tightly. This time Julie was not hugging from the side, but frontally. We had a lot of joyful conversations that evening. It was obvious that both Kevin and Julie had thought about it a lot, and they even showed me which bedroom they had planned for the nursery and which decorations they would use when they found out if it was a girl or a boy. Julie also planned to go on maternity leave in the 7th month and might not return to work, as Kevin earned more than enough to feed them alone. Even though I seemed to be carefree for the rest of the night, on Sunday, when I went to bed, fear was the main emotion I encountered. What if this child is mine? I couldn't get it out of my head. I was wondering if something about a child's appearance might alert people, especially Kevin. Fortunately, the child's eye color would not be a problem. Although Kevin had brown eyes like our mother, our father had blue eyes, so Kevin had a recessive blue gene. I had blue eyes, just like Julie. Since Julie had blue eyes and Kevin had the recessive blue gene, the child had a 50-50 chance of having blue eyes if it was Kevin's child, and 100% of mine. Kevin also had brown hair like our mother, while mine was closer to my father's blonde hair, and my facial features were my father's, while Kevin's were more like my mother's. Besides, I was 10 centimeters taller than Kevin and much broader in the shoulders. I didn't know if any of these differences would play a role. I did not study biology, but was a hydrodynamics engineer. Eventually, I managed to sleep for a few hours, but the next morning I was in a bad mood. On Monday morning, after Kevin left for work, I talked to Julie. "Why didn't you tell me you'd given up birth control?" I asked. "No way," she laughed. "There's no way I'd let a piece of plastic come between us. Besides, I took steps to make sure the baby was Kevin's," she giggled. "What measures?" "After I stopped birth control, I took a shower every time after we made love," she chuckled. "Besides, I had the most favorable period for conception when Kevin and I were on vacation, and I'm sure that's when I got pregnant." I knew that Julie had a bidet in her bathroom, but I didn't know if using it was an effective means of contraception. I didn't know how old she was, so I couldn't verify her statement that the baby was conceived during their vacation. Anyway, there was nothing I could do about it right now, so I just shrugged my shoulders. I didn't know much about pregnancy, so I read a little about it. In the months that followed, I found out that Julie was one of about 10% of pregnant women whose libido increased during pregnancy, and guess who was tasked with coping with this increase? I also learned that douching after love is the only possible method of birth control if it is performed within 5 to 10 minutes after ejaculation, and I do not remember that she ever, at least once, did not hug and shower with me for at least 15 minutes, and usually 20 or more after sexual intercourse. As time went on, she also showed herself much better and faster than if the child had been conceived during her vacation with Kevin, so I just accepted that I might become a biological father. Considering all the troubles in my life, it was a miracle that I got my master's degree in 18 months. My grades weren't as high as they might have been if I hadn't had mental turmoil and guilt, but so what, my engineering degree was in high demand, and when I graduated from high school, I had several good job offers. I graduated from high school when Julie was just starting her 3rd trimester of pregnancy. I was planning to get a job in a city located about an hour and a half drive from Kevin and Julie's house. However, Kevin had other plans. He had a serious conversation with me at a local park 2 weeks before I was going to graduate. After a short conversation, he said, "Blake, I want to ask you a big favor." "Anything, brother," I smiled. "Can you stay with us until the baby is born? I can get you a temporary job at the large company I work for, and hopefully your new employer, whoever he is, can wait a couple of months before you start working." Why do you want me to stay until the baby is born? Because Julie really relies on you for all the housework, and when I'm not around, she feels much more confident if you're around. Pregnancy, disrupts the hormonal background in women, and she gets nervous. He laughed. And we both like having you around. Is it possible? Of course, I had no reason to refuse my brother, a man who sacrificed his life for the life of his family, including me. Of course I'll stay if I can sort it out somehow, I replied and hugged him tightly. My future employer agreed that I would postpone going to work in the office for 3 months if I completed a 2-day introductory course, and they would give me calculations for remote work, which would mean that I would not need a temporary job at Kevin's company. Although everything was going well at work, I regretted that I had no alternative but to do a favor for Kevin, although in fact I had no alternative. Shortly before Julie went into her 8th month, I realized that our love was no longer entertainment. While the physical aspects were as good as ever, the emotional part was just off the charts. Although I've had past relationships in which I thought I was in love, I've never experienced anything so emotionally intense before. Unfortunately, it was not a one-time love. It happened every time we made love until Julie became incapacitated at 8.5 months old. But even then she insisted on hugging for an hour every day, even if we couldn't make love. The fateful day finally arrived. At 4 a.m. Kevin woke me up and said, "She went into labor. We're going to the hospital right now." I hugged them both goodbye and made them promise to call me as soon as I could visit them. Little Margot Lisbeth Burns was born at 8:04 a.m. after, fortunately, a short and easy, in such cases, in absolute numbers, not easy, birth. I packed all my things and prepared them for departure a few days before, as both grandmothers were due to arrive as soon as the baby was born, and they needed my room. That day, I saw a newly made mother and child in the hospital. I know I'm biased against Margot. She was the cutest baby I'd ever seen in my life, and Julie looked surprisingly good. While Kevin was not in the room, he called, and Julie was breastfeeding. She fell into a reverie. "I'm sorry I emotionally blackmailed you, Blake. Now that I know it's time for you to leave, I want to admit that I never intended to cheat on Kevin with someone else. What happened at Motel 6 was a setup. I just had an irresistible love interest in you. I had to possess you, and that was the only way to get you to make love to me." I was stunned. I just sat there with my mouth open. Of course, I wasn't going to snap at the new nursing mom, and Julie knew it. Maybe that's why she confessed then. While I sat in stony silence, she hadn't finished yet. "By the way, you're Margot's biological father, but no one else will ever know," she smiled. Yes, she really smiled. Again, I was stunned into silence. After a minute's pause, during which Julia mostly looked lovingly at Margot feeding, I began to ask how she knew that I was the biological father when Kevin, shining like a full moon, returned to the ward. "Well, I've notified all the relatives," he chuckled. "The grandmothers will arrive tomorrow evening, and my sister and her husband will come by next week. Julie's dad and brother are coming too." After a short conversation, during which I again demonstrated my newly acquired acting skills, I said goodbye. That evening, I left for my new apartment and for work. I hugged Kevin tightly and told him how much I love him and how happy I am for him. I kissed the new mom and baby on the forehead. It was only when I got into my car that all the pent-up emotions burst out and I cried for the first time since my father died. The story should have ended there. Everyone was supposed to live happily ever after, and Kevin was supposed to enjoy good karma for the rest of his days. Instead, I learned that karma is a fickle fool. Little Margot was about 20 months old, and she was already running. She never walked anywhere, and talking in almost whole sentences, and Kevin was the happiest and proudest father in history. Julie really got into motherhood and seemed very pleased to be raising Margot and starting to exhibit her work in local galleries. I had just spent a very pleasant long weekend visiting Kevin, Julie, and Margot, probably spending at least 10 hours playing with Margot, who had sunk into my heart like no other, when my sister called me on Wednesday morning after I returned home. "Kevin had an accident and is in the hospital." "How serious is this, sis?" I asked. "He may not survive. He's very seriously injured," she sobbed. "Which hospital is he in?" I got the information, told my boss that it was a family emergency, and left, taking some things from my apartment. Obviously, Everyone was in deep sadness when I arrived at the hospital. Kevin was driving to work, and he was hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light. This was his fourth arrest for drunk driving, because drunks always seem to survive. When I went to visit Kevin, Julie and my mom were in the room, both in serious condition. When I grabbed Kevin's hand and told him to be strong, "Big brother," his eyes opened. He whispered something to Julie, who was sitting next to him. Then she turned to me and said, "Kevin wants to talk to you alone for a minute." Julie and Mom left the room, and I bent down to hear Kevin. "Blake, I'm not going to make it. Promise me you'll take care of my girls. They'll need you. You have to take care of them, just like I took care of you and my sister after my father died." Then he started coughing. When Kevin stopped coughing, he said, "Promise me, brother. Promise me." "I promise I'll take good care of them," I replied, and tears welled up in my eyes. Kevin had a big smile on his face for a few seconds, and then he started coughing again. This time, all kinds of monitors and bells turned on. I left the room when 2 nurses and a doctor ran in. 5 minutes later, when everyone was watching, the doctor came out with an unhappy expression on her face. We didn't need to know what she said to Julie to figure out what happened, as I picked up Julie when she fainted. We knew Kevin was dead. Karma is a damn fickle fool. I kept saying over and over in my head as I carried Julie to the couch in the waiting room and the nurse came to help her. The funeral and reception were a living hell for me. I dealt with them only knowing that I had to be strong for Julie, my mom, and my sister. Of course, Margot knew something was going on, but she didn't understand it. She kept saying, "Don't cry, Mommy." But despite her best efforts, it didn't help Julie. I gave a eulogy in honor of Kevin, honestly saying that he was the best person I had ever known, and expressed the hope that in the future I could become at least 1/10 of what he was. For the next few days, I stayed with Julie, Margot, and Julie's mom at Kevin's house. Julie, doing her best to review the insurance policies, talk to the police about the drunk, play with Margot, discuss Kevin's will with the lawyer, and do everything else that was necessary. When I returned to work, Julie and I talked on the phone every day. I felt that she was not all right. When, about a week after my return, she asked me, "What did Kevin say to you in the hospital room before he died?" I didn't want to lie to her, so I told her, "Did you promise?" "I promised." "Are you going to keep your promise?" "Yes, I intend to." "Then get your ass over here as soon as you can settle things in your current place," she said decisively and hung up the phone. I've dated 2 women in the last few months, but I've never really been in love with either of them. Besides, although I liked my job, I did not imagine that I would work there for the rest of my life. After I got enough sleep, I made a decision. The next day I called Julie and said, "I'll come to your place this weekend to see the new houses with you and Margot. I'll email you the ads that I'm most interested in right now, and we can discuss this in more detail when I arrive." There was a long silence before she asked, "You don't want to live in this house?" "There are too many memories." "Are you looking for a new job?" "There are 3 specialties in your region that I am suitable for. I will send my resume this afternoon." I heard sobbing on the other end of the line. "Don't cry," I said. "We have work to do." Julie pulled herself together and groaned. "Okay." I ended the conversation with the words, "See you on Friday around 1800 hours." When I got there on Friday, I threw a giggling Margot in the air, and then hugged and tickled her while she squealed with joy. Julie was standing there with a wry smile on her face and her arms crossed over her chest. When I lowered Margot to the ground, still holding her hand, I grabbed her mom, pressed her to my chest with my other hand and kissed her passionately. When we broke off the kiss, I said, "I'm here to start fulfilling my promise." That night, Julie and I confessed to each other for the first time that we were making love. Despite the fact that the DNA test proved that I was Margot's biological father, I insisted on adopting her so that for the rest of the world she would be Kevin's daughter. I got a new job. We bought a new house with some of the money from Kevin's insurance policies, and 10 months after I returned, Julie and I got married. She was pregnant with our son, whom, of course, we named Kevin. However, that weekend, before it all started, I had a heart-to-heart conversation with Julie. "Julie, I love you, but my life will not turn into hell, as it would have happened to Kevin if you had cheated on me. I would have thrown you out without a second thought and would have done everything in my power to get sole custody of Margot and any other children we might have had. If we are going to be together from now on, You will have to sign a firm prenuptial agreement stipulating that in case of infidelity, you will transfer all your and our joint property to me and agree to my sole custody, even if the court may not comply with the custody agreement. Of course, I will also agree to the same conditions. Do you agree? Or should I fulfill my brother's last request remotely? Julie stared at me for a long minute. I met her gaze with a steely expression. Finally, she said, I want you, and only you. Have your lawyer prepare the most reliable prenuptial agreement possible, and I'll sign it. Now that that's over, I could use another deposit of liquid in my bank. End.